afternoon. My name is Andy Ness, and we're here today to take part in Bryan's celebration of life. And I want to thank all of you who were able to turn out, and I want to welcome all of you who are watching online. I have a few little announcements to make here first, and then we'll get into our program. So it's nice that we could meet physically. We wish that more could have. It's been almost a year since his passing. On the 31st will be a year. We very much wanted to be at the beautiful Harris barn, which has been refurbished in Delta. But again, with circumstances we're not allowed to do it at this point in time, so we're doing the best we can with this. We decided to come together and celebrate this. We want to send out a welcome to the farmers and those in the industry who are unable to join us. Bryan made a lot of friends in the ag business and elsewhere, and just not in BC but across through the West. And so we welcome you. We also are welcoming people right through to PEI. And note that the family will try to physically come together in Manitoba this summer to celebrate close to what would have been his 85th birthday. Okay, a couple of notes here. First, I'd like to thank William Ness for doing the live stream show and Steve Taves for doing the photo stream. We do have an order of ceremony. I'll just read it to you so you know what to expect down the line. There may be a couple of changes, but at least you have an idea. Bryan's daughter Alexis will recite a poem that Bryan's wife Diane found, and it reminded her of Bryan. With permission from the author, Diane has made a few changes, so it sounds even a little bit more like Bryan. Then Bryan's sons, Andrew, Jeff, and John will each come up separately to say a few words. Then I will have a few words, and we will finish with Doug Halverson of Manitoba speaking. Then I will let you folks at home know when this happens, but we will then stop for about 15 minutes while we watch the photo stream here, which you have been watching already perhaps, so that if you need a break at home for 12 to 15 minutes, you won't miss anything. And then we will be back for the closing parts of it and finish off with Alexis reciting a poem and a toast to Bryan. We have a chair here with a hat, a golf hat on it, and this is in memory of Bryan and Diane's son Jack, who passed away earlier. He would have been here, and I'm sure had lots to say about Bryan. But he's probably sitting up with Bryan, sipping a single malt scotch right now. So we'll think of that. Okay. So I think we will ask Alexis to come up and recite the poem that Diane has found.
Can I steal your... Do you have your card there?
Pardon?
I am without the order of ceremony for my own thing. Oh. Jackson's here. Can you see us? No.
All right. I also want to say, so this is a celebration. I was thinking of this earlier. There's going to be tears and all sorts of things today. But if you like something, obviously we'll laugh, etc. But if you like something and you want to clap, or if you want to whatever, just go ahead. Like, we are celebrating him, and he was not a stoic man per se very often. So enjoy as much as emotion is there on happy and sad. Enjoy. So this poem is called Who Doesn't? And it's actually in the order of ceremony, and we're just saying it because people at home doing live stream can't see it. It's by Donna Kane, and Mum did get in touch with the author and ask permission just to add a few more things. Who doesn't love a man who can back a trailer within an inch of its mark? Who can make a rope halter while chatting with neighbors? Stack damn good alfalfa 8 rows high. Study the conformation of a Jersey cow or lovingly plant yet another rose. Create French cuisine, can sleep with a baby on his chest, and always and forever looks good in a kilt. Who inspects the inner workings of a track pack bagger or studies the depth of kernel, size of core, and length of corn cob so thoroughly you know you've disappeared, and for a minute you are watching a boy you haven't yet met. His single-purpose concentration so fierce it's clear he loved the world before you or any other girl came into it.
Sorry about that thing.
Yeah, she's just trying to keep me down.
Okay, I would ask Andrew Arthur to come up now and say a few words.
Sure.
Good thing I printed it bigger than this. More words on the page.
Well, yeah, but now people in the back can read this, so I don't need my glasses. Bryan Arthur, Dad, Papa Bryan, Art, Sir Sean Connery, Gandalf, maybe not, but if someone had a problem, they could usually come to Bryan, and like a wizard, he would help solve it. Loved by family and friends, Dad knew how to help people, and to get things done. At the farm in Edwin, Manitoba one summer, back in the mid-70s, I watched his dad, I'm pretty sure it was Dad, fixed a cracked seam in the truck's gas tank by pressing a bar of soap into the seam, stopping the leak until it could get properly fixed. Many years later, I was working for the Geological Survey, and we were many miles up a logging road when a small log got stuck under a tire and slammed into the gas tank, opening a seam. Gas was rapidly leaking out, and my mind thought back to Dad's quick fix. I had no bar of soap, but I did have a big chunk of old Canadian cheddar in my lunch bag. Pressed that hunk of cheese into the tank, and the seam clogged up, and it sealed the crack, and we made it back to town until it got properly fixed. He was a strong man, Bryan. As kids, all the cousins marveled as he pitched a bale to the top of the trailer, loaded with hay, his unruly comb-over flailing in the wind. And thankfully, he finally gave up on that comb-over and embraced the top dome. I and others are slowly getting there. And although ball caps were a common addition to Dad's head, he could nap with ease. As kids, he would say, "Wake me up when the big hand gets to this point on my watch," and be asleep a minute later. 10, 15, or 20 minutes later, we'd tap him on the shoulder and away we would go. Lots of memories of Colin and I traveling back to Manitoba for summer visits, usually by air, but I believe once we drove in Dad's MG, and we also came back from Manitoba by train with 60 Jersey cows in 2 reconfigured railway mail cars. That was an experience. Milking, feeding, cleaning, and trading milk for bottled water at several stops along the way. Our mother gathered all our clothes from that trip and could never really get the cow smell out. I do wish we had a few pictures of that trip. I took Dad fishing to Haida Gwaii a number of years back, and sadly it was an El Nino year and the fish were scarce. Our total catch totaled about 10 pounds of pink salmon. Still a great trip and memories with Dad. We will miss Bryan, but the memories and stories we will continue to share will help him move on within all of us. So, raise a toast to Dad.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. I could see a lot of your dad in that as you were speaking there, and that's a good thing. Okay, next we'll call Jeff up. Where is he sitting? Oh, right there. Yeah, front and center. Good. This
big as my printing is,
Oh my god.
I still need glasses. And I apologize for how this is going to play out. I'm going to do my best. Bryan Arthur, my dad, liked, respected, loved, and helped raise strong women. So I'd like to start with a quote from one, Maya Angelou, who quite famously said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did." I was much better at this in practice. But people will never forget how you made them feel. The past week or two, as I thought about what to write in a tribute to Bryan, I was filled with many raw emotions, from smirks of amusement to raucous laughter to heaves of sadness and very wet eyes, all brought by the experiences I am so fortunate to have had with Dad. I first laid eyes on this bear of a man when I was a spirited concern of about 6 or so. I think he was in his 20s, a hair-covered prairie Adonis. Tanned and muscled, driving a cool little light blue MGA. He had the calm demeanor that only big dogs have. No real threat, no real need for any edge of concern. Dressed sharply as a confident gadabout town, he wore his black hair trimmed neatly, save for a row of out-of-character long tresses thrown over his fast-emerging upper forehead that lost every conflict with every slight breeze and needed to be readjusted. He graced us in our Riverview apartment, and Mum was happy, and they had good times with friends like Grant and his wife Galen. Bryan joined our clan in earnest when we arrived in Portage. The sports car was gone, replaced by a series of trucks more suited to a Hayman's needs. We were now a family, even though he was gone a lot doing what Bryan did. He worked. It wasn't a mantra and it wasn't a show. It was what he did. When things were tough, working harder made it better. When things were good, working harder made it build. Work gloves were a good idea, but not needed. Just a few more hay slivers to pull out of thick calluses in front of the eyes, wide eyes of a kid in awe of the total lack of pain. He had tools and a big truck, a 10-speed as Bob and Mackenzie would later call it, and he could do anything with that truck. In the projects, we developed routines, trips to Brandon in the red and white station wagon, comfortable and warm and having fun in the pre-seatbelt era, in a rear rumble seat serenaded by Andy Williams crooning, Simon and Garfunkel's Cecilia, or Whitaker's whistling. Good friends like the Jarsons showed up at that point. On special days, I'd polish his shoes before we went to the Portage Hotel in our Sunday best for T-bones and maybe a sip of Matus. Mixing a Ryan ginger for him as he sat in our sun-drenched kitchen and regaled us with the stories from his run to Alberta with his buddy Bootsy Bill. New to me were the other trips to farms, the Arthur farm, the Balches, and though I love the outdoors, the great spreads of food, the warm, inclusive, and happy people there, I was always struck by that odd smell that would be in your clothes even the next day. Poor bastards, I thought. Why would anybody live like that? We went on and we built close to 1,000 square foot bungalow, a mansion in my eyes, on the Peony farm outside of Portage la Prairie. By ourselves, every nail driven, every board cut. I got to knock mortar off our reclaimed bricks and help Jack Lake assemble the fireplaces and try for the first and last time chewing and spitting tobacco like he did. Dad got a real kick out of the faces I made and the colors I turned. My brother Jack, though, got to run the rototiller and soon after joined Dad to drive the tractor, pulling the baler by himself and looked so damn cool in the work clothes he wore, and I wanted that. Then came a cow, a single cow. He and Mum returned from a trip to BC with stories of buying a cow. One. A Jersey, whatever the hell that was. Could have been a Norwegian blue for me. I had my dog Ned, and they had this cow out in BC somewhere. It was soon after that I remember Doug Homerson and Dad huddled over our table laughing and toasting over a blueprint of a parcel of land they were calling the Triple F Farm. And in the blink of an eye, we were in Edwin, Manitoba, with way more than one cow. Though any long-haired, awkward, and desperate to be cool 15-year-old wouldn't understand it, it was the beginning of the very best and most important part of my upbringing. Through Bryan, my too cool brother, and Bryan's friends Symes and Duff, I learned everything about a barn full of calm and beautiful Jerseys. How to feed them, how to milk them, how to keep a barn so clean you could walk it in your sock feet. And oddly, in fact, that there are 2 5 o'clocks in every day. Who knew? The routines and the surprises that required instant action, Bryan always addressed with knowledge and a skill that made you feel that if the world itself split open in front of you, he would simply amble over to his truck, grab some binder twine and a few tools, and deal with it so you could get to the barn and milk the girls on time. He showed me how to deal with anything unknown in a measured way, drawing on your life's experiences up to that point, so that even if you didn't get it 100%, you weren't that far off and it could be tweaked to perfection quickly. He taught me to respect hazards and heavy equipment, how to fence and tend to animals, how to fix what was broken and leave it alone if it wasn't. When I worked hard for him, no matter what it was, this
The Scotch will keep her, is he?
when I worked hard for him, no matter what it was, the spontaneous look of admiration he gave me was worth more than anything on this planet to me. Because of Bryan, this city kid got to live on Eden Dairy Farm. And we had the warmest family, and I was part of the Arthurs and the Warburtons and the Bulges. And we laughed every day. Real laughs. Like when Jeffrey was so grossly hungover, having just slid across a bed. Prior to that solid touch and deep baritone, Jeffrey, that got me out of bed no matter what. That day, it was Jeffrey that had to crawl into a deep pit of skunky brewer's mash and throw that heavy wet grain over my head into a wheelbarrow between fits of retching, and then listen to every other hand in the barn laugh their ass off as I greenly wheeled it through the barn and doled it out. Oh, and that horrible smell that got into your clothes. To this day, whenever I make a call to the country and I open the door and I catch a whiff of it, it is a touchstone of the most beautiful place, and I yearn for it, and it's a part of me I wouldn't trade. Bryan didn't tell you what was right, he had a way of making you feel what was right. Like when I dragged a pretty little thing out to the farm with his warm brown eyes smiling, he said to Mom, "That girl knows just how much rope to give that boy, and that boy knows just how much rope he can take." I married that girl, or she married me. When things didn't go as planned, his calm work, harder plan, approach to everything showed me that not only how to deal with it, but real life and why you don't stop. Because what is possible ahead, new goals, new friends, new life. We were always close, but when the miles between us grew, the time we spent only became sweeter. fishing trout in Manitoba on my turf, or salmon on his, cooking together, listening Pav, belt out Nessun Dorma at volume level 11, enjoying a good scotch, laughing, discovering new friends in Parksville on an unplanned adventure, meeting the indomitable Rula, and sharing everything wonderful that she has brought into our collective lives. Days so good, I believe few of us really ever get them. Seeing my kid's eyes in awe of that same bear that inspired awe in mine at that age. I never got over the feeling of joy when I got to spend a day with him, anytime I visited. Maybe a turn of a wrench, maybe stack a load, and the reward that was always the best, that warm look of appreciation he gave you. I still crave it. That was my place, what I wanted most. Well, I was always mildly jealous of Lex and Andy, who filled what I considered was my place in the truck. You don't have legions of longtime friends like Bryan unless you are a fair, honest soul, as he was. Bryan made me feel safe. He made me feel happy. He made me feel loved. Really loved without boundaries. And though I miss him, he's a very big part of me. And everyone else who knew him. We miss you, Dad. We love you from all of us.
Thank you, Jeffrey. You tell it like it is, and I think we have all seen some of Bryan, of different things you've said in there, and it's well said. So thank you. And next, I'd like to call on John, Bryan's son from Calgary, to come and say a few words.
Hello, everybody. My name is John. I am Bryan's oldest child, in case you're wondering. Shortest child. And newest child. How did that happen? Well, I just found out. Jeff just said it was one of those trips to Alberta. Somewhere back in 1958 or early 1959, I was created. And Bryan didn't know I was created until after I'd been given away. As a child, I yearned to find out who my real family was. My adopted parents never hid the fact from me that I was adopted. Eventually, the adoption records in Alberta got opened up, and with the aid of technology, in about 15 seconds, I found my mother. And she wasn't very happy about that, let me tell you. However, through a series of events that I've sort of found out a little bit out, somehow Bryan found out that there was another son out there. Well, he knew he had another son, but that he was alive, kicking, and looking for him. And one day my phone rang. And on my call display it said Bryan Arthur, and I'll tell you, I couldn't get there quick enough, and I was scared shitless to answer it at the same time. And I picked it up, and the first thing he said to me was, "Hi, this is Bryan Arthur. I understand you've been looking for me. I'm your father. You're my son, and how tall are you?" There'd been a myth that this height that Colin and Andrew had came from that side of the family, but apparently I was the missing link that proved it really didn't. I got his height. I got his hair cut, as you can see. I got a bunch of things that I didn't even know I had from him. An innate love for berries, putting a lot of pepper on my eggs. How I managed to get that. But what does a 50-year-old man and a 74-year-old man, how did they get together? You know, well set in ways and already older, but we managed to. And with the aid of an awful lot of family, and genuine love from this family, I've been brought into the fold. I have incredible relationships with my brothers, my sisters. I hunt, I fish with them, I talk to them, I get drunk with them, I do stupid ass shit with them, just like regular brothers do. And it's all because of Bryan. He's blessed me with probably the biggest gift someone could give anyone, and that's family. So I have a real family. I've had a few events too that have happened along the way here. So first Thanksgiving that I spent with my new family was at Jeff and Shelby's house. And in the course of the weekend events, everyone decided to go to the liquor store together. And it just so happened that that day was Customer Appreciation Day at that particular liquor store. And I know, right? Free booze, right? And a lot of it. And there happened to be an astute little Scotsman who was extremely versed in Scotch. Well, Bryan and I, and that's something else I got from him, by the way, too, is the love for Scotch. Bryan and I sat at that table with him, and he poured us shot after shot after shot after shot, and we enjoyed them all, and I had to go home and go to bed after. Right? At that same event, Lexi came out with the family and brought the family album with her. I thought, oh, great. But you know, there's no people in the Arthur family album. It's only pictures of cows. I'm not kidding you. Oh, there's Mabel. Oh, she was a good one, eh? It took a lot of family albums for me to finally actually get to see some people. So, but we did. But I learned what was important and the roots of the family, right? So I've learned a lot of stuff that I didn't know I was ever going to learn. I can tell what a canola field is now. I didn't know how to do that before. I got an amazing tour, a couple trips back of a dairy operation, and that was an absolute hoot, and got to spend the entire day in the truck with Diane and Bryan and Lexi. Got a little bit of shit on my shoes. I felt like part of the family, right? So my love for so many things has... It's okay.
Bryan's here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and he's telling me right now you've been bullshitting enough to get off the stage. So I especially want to thank Diane for, I mean, it's a big thing to, you know, bring a snot-nosed 50-year-old into the family. So I want to thank you for being willing to do it and embracing me and my family as well. And
My pleasure.
I honestly feel like I am the most blessed person in life because I found something that not many people have. So thank you very much.
My glasses.
Try these?
Did you put him down when you went to get the drink?
I'm not sure. Well, these will work.
You fog up on me.
I have something to say. First, I just wanted to say that you make me feel a little guilty because I have really enjoyed traveling with Bryan all these years, and I'm sorry that I took your place. But I've always felt very close to him, and I loved working with him and seeing who he was. And it's funny because I'm right in the middle. He was too young to be my father and too old to be my brother, but I felt like family. He was a family member. I was a family member. So what I want to read to you is, and incidentally, where I first met him was on the farm you were talking about in Edwin. Myself and two other young truck drivers took a load of cattle to Bryan and then continued on east to Ormstown, Quebec to show the Spedifor cattle in 1980. And we pulled in there early in the morning. We unloaded a bunch of cattle that were going there, tied the show cattle to the side of the truck and gave them water, and then he took us down the road to the big house, and I think, were you involved in getting the eggs and the bacon together? We had a wonderful breakfast, thank you to Bryan, and we stayed in touch ever after that. And then when he got back out here, we got back together.
That's amazing.
Anyway, here we go. Just a year ago, we lost a great man. He was a genuine, interesting friend, a family man, a cattle enthusiast, agricultural salesman, and much more to so many. Today we gather to help ease our loss and celebrate the life of this well-traveled and much-loved man. I knew him for too short of 40 years of his life. Traveling and working beside him for the last 25, I felt privileged to get to know him so well. He so loved the Jersey breed, curling, farming, machinery, but most of all, the wonderful family he had built around him. He spoke often of them on our long driving trips. Proud of them all. His grandchildren were always a topic of enjoyment as he commented on the most recent events, how they were coming along. Bryan was especially proud of the company he created, Pacific Forage, and his daughter Lexi, who partnered with him. If you met or had dealings with Bryan, I would say you learned something new by the time you parted ways. He was a wealth of experience, so it's unfortunate that we could not have downloaded his knowledge before his departure. And we may all be better people because of them. Oh, and if you think Bryan is gone, spend some time visiting with any of his children. His spirit lives on in them. And Bryan is with us today. Thank you. We will next have Doug Halverson speak. Want to borrow my glasses?
Yeah, right. Be good to get the mask off. Just my luck to get to follow a pair of silver-tongued real estate salesmen. For those of you that don't know, Jan and I have been friends of Bryan and Dan's for a long, long time, back in Portage la Prairie. When Jan and I moved into I call them apartments, I had tenements down and Jan made me change it. On 17th Street, 50 years ago, this year, little did we know that Diane and Bryan would become our lifelong friends. And even more, little did I know that Bryan, a hairy bear of a man with whom I had almost nothing in common, would become my mentor, teacher, and guru rolled into one. A lot of times my dad, my brother, and always my best friend. I've been told my job here is to keep it light and keep it short, but I don't think there's a big chance of that. We're paying tribute to a man who was larger than life and made a big impression on anyone he met. I'd led an easy, predictable life in the city, and I was about to learn that there's a whole different world out there, full of adventure and surprises, and Bryan took it upon himself to teach me all about it. I didn't know when he invited me to accompany him on a quick, early evening trip to Brandon to take a brailer down there, that a pattern was being set for much of our relationship. It was a school night. I was a young school teacher, but that wasn't a problem since we weren't going to be late. Who knew that a flat tire on a baler in the middle of the Carberry Hills would see us finally getting home around 2 or 3 in the morning. And it wasn't long after this that Bryan and Dan introduced us to the place that he loved and missed, British Columbia. On this amazing spring break vacation, he made sure that our adventures would continue. Just to keep things exciting, he managed to drum up an offshore earthquake the night before we were heading to the island. We were on the last ferry to cross that day due to high seas, and the trip was one to remember. Just to make sure that it would be just that, Bryan and I spent most of the trip out on the top deck, getting drenched when waves crashed over the bow. When we got to Nanaimo, the wind and the waves were so bad, the ferry had several attempts to get in and finally had to back in. Not before, though, snapping a few arm thick, and I don't mean my arm, I mean Bryan's arm, hawsers on the way. During that time on the island, Bryan took me on our first, but definitely not last, oyster picking expedition. This became one of our island traditions and carried on right through to the end, along with our salmon fishing. Those $100 a pound salmons that we caught were just awesome. Being much younger than Bryan, it was amazing to me that there didn't seem to be anything that he couldn't do, other than being able to spell to save his life. They finally decided to build a house at the peony farm, and Bryan was going to build the whole thing, as Jeff already said. There was always something to help out with, and on a warm summer afternoon I can remember us sitting on top of the roof, shingling away, listening to the Philadelphia Flyers win the Stanley Cup. I was always in awe of Bryan's strength, and when we were doing that day, watching him carry a few bundles of shingles up the ladder at a time just impressed me no end. During that building, and Jeff's already mentioned it a little bit, Bryan always managed to find colorful characters to get things done. And looking back, I'm hard pressed to think of almost anyone that Bryan hired that wasn't a character. The rest of us weren't. We worked for free. One of his prize hires when building the house was reportedly the best mason in town, Jack Lake. And the fireplace he created was beautiful and provided many cozy hours for family and friends. It would be interesting to know, however, just how many broken wine bottles there are on that fireplace. And speaking of bottles, Bryan and I learned a completely new skill while we were at the peony farm. Bryan discovered that we could make beautiful crystal looking glasses out of empty Alberta Premium bottles. It took us many attempts to finally come up with a good set, but we always managed to keep enough empties around to practice. During that time, Bryan and Dan introduced us to Thanksgiving trips to Grand Forks. The agenda rarely varied. Friday night supper at the Bronze Boot, Saturday dinner and Sunday brunch at the Crystal Palace and Chuck House at the Westward Ho, and Sunday supper at Whitey's Wonder Bar. The Bronze Boot was our place for 16-ounce steaks, except for the night that Diane and I hit the pickled herring before the steak.
Yeah.
Bryan and I would, Saturdays was shopping day for Jan and Diane, and after looking at cowboy boots, Bryan and I would spend the afternoon in some little bar watching baseball, and I cherished those times together. Those weekends were a chance to get away and just have fun, but there was always one little thing hanging over them. Papa Bryan was always a little sad, wondering if his Lexi was doing okay. Getting back over the border was always an adventure, since the limit was probably $75 in those days. And with Bryan in his new cowboy boots and Queen Diana in the back seat wearing enough to put us over the limit herself, it was a tense situation. Bryan's journey back into the world of Jersey farming became the source for a host of lessons for this city slicker. I'll never forget walking into that barn for the first time after the cows had been there for a few days overnight. It was still cold out. It was a horrible smell, right? Oh. One of the things I first learned on the farm was that, yes, you can eat your pet steer. Poor Joey provided us with a lot of good meat that probably would have been even better if Bryan had bothered getting a real butcher to cut it up instead of then that actually knew the names of the cuts. We ate roast and steak. What kind? We had no idea. Jan and I spent many a weekend out at the farm, and between the big brick house and the little farmhouse, we all shared many, many happy times. From playing games around the table, to watching the Muppet Show up in the attic, to chasing chickens into the coop before dark. It was a wonderful time, and it provided all of us, but especially me, a wide variety of learning experiences. Who knew that our first trip to a fair would bog down at the end of the farm lane? The flat tire on the trailer was just the first of many mishaps that provided us with much laughter Not at the time, of course, but for years to come. Bryan was always able to come up with solutions to almost any problem. But one of the all-time best was the night we were rolling into Carberry with a load of cows and the truck broke down. Fortunately, we were right beside a dealership in town, so Bryan proceeded to borrow a universal joint off one of the trucks in the lot. It did get a little interesting when the RCMP arrived, but Bryan, of course, with his sincere, sweet-talking manner, managed to convince them that the cows couldn't be left on the street all night, and he would take care of things in the morning. And he did. Bryan instinctively knew with a young guy like me that engineer success was a good teaching tool. On our first trip to a fair, appropriately clad in pearly whites, Bryan had me show Rosella, a lovely old cow who had seen the show ring many times before. We were showing against Bryan and little Rena, who was just a sweetheart of a little Jersey, right? It turned out well, since Rosella showed me rather than the other way around, and we actually won the class. It was a wonderful day. It gave me a real insight into why Bryan loved this aspect of the business. His knowledge and utter joy in being with his cows rubbed off on me and everyone else who had the privilege of meeting him on the show circuit. I was to learn that farmers teach a lot differently than teachers do. Before any fair trip, all the cows traveling had to be vaccinated. I had seen Bryan do the job many times, but I was totally unprepared one day for him to hand me the syringe and the bottle and send me down to the bottom barn to give the young heifers a shot before we left. I did learn how to do it, but I have to admit that it took me at least a half an hour before I could finally jab that first one. Being able to be with Bryan during those times at the farm was a privilege that I'll always treasure. Although there were times at the farm that felt a bit like hell, watching him with his jerseys always left me thinking that he's doing really well right now up in heaven, because he's already been there before whenever he had his cows. Oh, I almost forgot curling. Bryan and I joined the curling club for a couple of years and didn't set the world on fire, but we did have one claim to fame. We were newcomers to Edwin and accidentally won the Edwin Bondsville with Pam and Jeff. It turned out the locals weren't too happy with that, with the new folk taking the title, and it was the only year that trophy wasn't presented. And it was a big old beauty that sat in the corner. It must have been 100 years old. That was my last year of curling with Bryan, but he took up the sport when he moved back to BC and had his fair share of wins. And there's one thing, last thing, that all of you can do that Bryan would really appreciate. The Scotties started yesterday, and they actually started on the right foot because Chelsea Carey lost. And if there's one thing in the world that Bryan hated, it was Chelsea Carey.
That's great.
She was losing this
We
morning.
watched
too.
that.
Oh my god.
When the Arthurs moved to British Columbia, it was a sad day for all of us, but things didn't change as far as our relationship went. Although it often seemed we didn't see each other enough, we made many trips back and forth, and our girls were lucky to be able to spend time with Bryan. Our days spent on the island always provided them with opportunities to learn from him and to just have fun, which he was really good at. Bryan and I continued our ritual of me accompanying him on his travels around the lower mainland and the island. It was always interesting to see how he interacted with his customers, who were usually more friends than clients. The pattern from our younger years never changed, though. Many a time we headed out to run just a few short errands and ended up getting home much, much later than planned. The Bryan that most people saw in the plaid shirt was not the whole man, though. When you put him in a suit, he was transformed into a handsome, imposing gentleman. I'll never forget the evening Bryan showed up to visit me at the annual general meeting of the Teacher Society in Winnipeg. He'd been in town for meetings at the legislature and was all decked out. Most of the local teachers' associations always had hospitality rooms at the hotel we were in, with lots of free food, booze. So Bryan and I decided we'd better drop in on a few. And in a way that only Bryan could, he had everyone in those rooms, thinking that he was an educator of some kind. And many of the cute young things in the room hung on his every word. It has to be told, though, that that was the night he ended up ringing Jan's doorbell in Portage at a pretty late hour. The RCMP had been following him on the highway, so he went straight home and waited until they left before he could go the rest of the way out to Edwin. This good old boy farmer also had a true thirst for knowledge and an undying curiosity. On our last trip together, Bryan and Dan met us in Arizona, and we managed to get in some good touring. When we got to Taliesin West, the home of Frank Lloyd Wright, Bryan was fascinated and wanted to learn everything he could. And we could hardly wait to get him to the Grand Canyon, because we felt he would be as amazed by it as we were. It was a great idea, but Jan and I didn't count on the one thing that businessman Bryan had to have: good phone reception. He was fascinated, but he couldn't concentrate on anything that day because he had to be available at all times. The customer's always right, and Bryan was always right there. I could spend a lot more time reminiscing about all the life lessons and things I learned from Bryan. To close, here's just a sample of a few of my favorite quotes from the big guy. The Edwin one: "If you're a guy out, wear at your long bushy tail. Whatever you think's best, Ned. We're not building a piano here, Dougie." And that any of us that have worked with Bryan know this one: "Don't force it. Get a bigger hammer." But it's time for me to wrap up. That big, hairy bear of a man, of course, turned out to be a gentle, loving man whose friendship I always treasured, and all of us did. The greatest thing I learned from him was how to hug. And there was never anybody better at it. And if I had known that the last time we hugged was going to be the last time, I don't think I could have ever let go. Farewell, my dear friend. Oh, they're not Andy's?
No, I found these. Okay, we are going to take a little bit of a break and watch the slideshow. So again, people at home, there'll be a little bit of a break in the program, but do come back, because as soon as the slideshow's over, we have a couple more things to do and a toast to end up the ceremony.
So Andy, we should probably.
Voice might be one and the same. I've heard it too many.
Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountain, Shenandoah River. Life is old there, older than the trees, younger than the mountains, growing like a breeze. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country road.
You may think that I'm talking fool,
This love that I feel for you always will be. For you're not just time that I'm killing. I'm no longer one of those guys. As sure as I live, this love that I give is gonna be yours until the day that I die. Oh baby, I'm gonna love you forever, forever and ever, amen. As long as old men sit and talk about the weather, as long as old women sit and talk about old men. If you wonder how long I'll be faithful, I'll be happy to tell you again. I'm gonna love you forever and ever, forever and ever, amen. They say time takes its toll.
Why are there so many songs about rainbows? And what's on the other side? Rainbows are visions, but only illusions. And rainbows have nothing to hide. So we've been told, and some choose to believe it. I know they're wrong, wait and see. Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me. Who said that every wish would be heard and answered when wished on the morning star? Somebody thought of that, and someone believed it. Look what it's done so far. What's so amazing that keeps us stargazing? And what do we think we might see? Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me. All of us under its spell. We know that it's probably magic. Have you been half asleep? And have you heard voices? I've heard them calling my name. Is this the sweet sound that calls the young sailor? The voice might be one and the same. I've heard it too many times to ignore it. It's something that I'm supposed to be. Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me.
In twilight glow I see blue eyes crying in the rain. When we kissed goodbye and parted,
I knew we'd never meet again. Love is like a dying ember, and only memories remain. And through the ages I'll remember blue eyes crying in the rain. Someday when we meet up yonder, we'll stroll hand in hand again in a land that knows no parting. Blue eyes crying in the rain.
Gwi mar o'r siw da heid yn mwy, is hi da lugus dŵr yn bod. Hwgym ar linie gynyon tro, bed bwych ar lom o bosh.
All the money that e'er I had, I spent it in good company, and all the harm I've ever done, alas, it was to none but me. And all I've done for want of wit, to memory now I can't recall. So fill to me the parting glass, good night and joy be to you all. They're sorry for my going away, and all the sweethearts that e'er I had, they'd wish me one more day to stay. Since it fell into my lot that I should rise and you should not, I gently rise and softly call, good night and joy be to you all.
that was a lovely video, and showed a lot of Bryan and family and friends, and we all know. And we're going to continue now just with the ending shortly. We're going to have Alexis and Diane come up to you. Is that right?
Yeah, me and then Mom.
Yeah. Okay.
And just so I don't confuse myself.
Yeah, that's cool. They'll know the difference.
It's funny, when I wrote this, I thought half the stuff I'm going to say other people are going to say. And I actually wrote something else as well that was far more emotional. And I was like, there's no freaking way I'm going to get through that. So I just went back to repeating.
We'll make you laugh.
Yeah, exactly. No. Those of you who are not related to Bryan may not know that Arthur charm is actually a thing. I expect it may be hundreds of years old, but I know for certain it existed in my great-great-grandfather's time. For some, it has been diluted over the generations, but for the most part, Arthurs and their offspring are charming, charismatic communicators. Regardless of gender, Arthurs usually have good smiles, eyes that twinkle, they lead, and boy, can they bullshit. I believe before Dad was born, God rolled him in charisma and wrapped him in charm. When he wanted, Dad had a natural ability to let you know that he cared about you immediately, just as Jeff had said. And it was genuine, and it was secure. Of course, he also had a look that could freeze the blood in your veins. But that's not for today. Day 49. That's how long Dad was in the hospital before I could get in to see him. My mom managed to get on day 48. He'd been without family or friend to see him through Christmas and New Year prior to that. So on day 49, it was my turn to enter his room. The nurse was putting something in his IV, and he was watching her as I came into his area of the room, which he shared with 3 others. As he became aware of someone near him, he turned and he saw it was me, and he smiled. "Hello, you." "Ha!" he said. "You made me smile, just like you did the first time I saw you." The words nearly brought me to my knees. The only reason I was in that room was because Dad was palliative. Things were never going to get better. But he still made me feel loved and secure. One look, about 6 words, and that wonderful charm. I texted Mom later about it when I was in the car, because I couldn't call her because I was weeping. And she wrote back, "That silver-tongued bastard." Arthur charm. My dad had a very clear sense of right and wrong. He was generous with his time. He was committed to any endeavor he took on, either work or hobby. And he was very practical-minded and a problem solver. Plus, he loved to learn. As he aged, his love of learning just grew, and he continued to open up to new things. A farm boy who was raised on country music and church hymns learned to love ballet and opera. Going to the 3 tenors who performed on a New Year's Eve, it was one of the highlights of his life. A young man with a grade 8 or 9 education took a college course in Chaucer.
10.
Grade 10, sorry. Well, he always said 8 or 9. It was
He always
flair for
said
the
8 or
dramatic.
9. Yeah,
Took a college course for Chaucer when he was in his 30s because he was interested. Now, he was not perfect. He was a workaholic. He was stubborn. Oh, so stubborn. And that's inherited too. And he did not always make choices, more often as a younger man, that impressed my mother. But you see, those moments were born for the Arthur charm. He told a story from years before with reference to right and wrong, when he was 18 and my mom was 15, and he was taking her to the winter dance. And his car got stuck in a snowbank on a country road. Dangerous thing in a cold, cold, cold Manitoba winter. A wealthy neighbor who was a very good friend soon came by, and Dad saw him straight in the face and knew he saw him as the friend drove by and didn't stop. Dad was furious. He left the car, he walked for about a mile in the snow to get to Mum's. They eventually got to the dance, and when he arrived, he walked straight over to the neighbor and said to his face, "You left me out there." And the neighbor looked at him and said, "Oh, I didn't know it was you." And my father said right back, "It doesn't matter. You always stop." And that friendship ended because you always stop. Later in life, Dad was late to get Mum, but for a less noble reason. Mr. Jim Grant was one of Dad's very best friends back in the day. He stood up with Dad when he married Mum. He was very funny, very loyal. And he and Dad saw the world in a similar way. It just so happened also that Mr. Jim Grant at that time in his life was an alcoholic. And for a time he worked on a road scale, weighing commercial vehicles on a stretch of highway in Manitoba. So one day Dad stopped in to visit Jimmy at the scale, and he was invited to sit and chat for a time. And fairly quickly, Jimmy turned the close sign on at the scale. And out came the bottle of rye. And as they stopped and drank and probably solved most of the problems of the world, they were going through life, and then the problem of running out of mix came up. And Jimmy, also very practical, flipped the scale sign on as soon as he saw a Coca-Cola truck coming down the highway. The Coke truck pulled in, Jimmy went out, he and the driver had a chit-chat, Jimmy got his mix, driver didn't get his brakes checked, and on they way, and the close sign was put back on. Oh, the wild, wild west. Needless to say, Dad was late home and not in very good shape when he got there. Dad loved his family, all of us. And he loved making things grow, but he had a passion for dairy cows. He shared or possibly learned that passion from his father, my grandfather, Alex Arthur. My dad was introduced to different parts of Canada by traveling with the cattle to various parts from Ontario to BC, often by rail. Back then it was like bushwhacking, but on the train. But when he came to BC, that's when he fell in love with it. He stepped off that train in BC in the winter time and looked around, and all he saw was green. And as he tells it, he either said or thought, "Well, this is God's country." Dad followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a leader in Jersey clubs, associations. He supported 4-H, produced some wonderful bloodlines in his own Manitoba herd, Eden Dairy Jerseys. Although he had a habit of naming too many beautiful calves in the barn Diane or Diana, he did produce many cattle show winners, as was referenced, Glendowan Reflection Rosella and Rena being two. There was also Falcon Court Reflection Moolinda, and then of course, Moolinda, yeah, she was a winner. And then of course there was Grafton Lucy's Belle. The classifier gave Belle a 96.8 out of 100. Classifiers there's different points to a cow and different productions that they do that they get graded on. Well, 96.8 out of 100 was a huge number. And Dad told the story that when the classifier came to the barn and looked over the herd, his eyes stopped on Belle. And when he went to her and looked at her udder, he looked up at Dad and said, "Why didn't you tell me?" At that time, it was a highest rating of a Jersey cow that ever received in Canada. And it was a big thing for the prairie guys to beat out the Ontario and Quebec guys, who had more money to play with and more cows to work with. Even very close to the end, when Dad would tell that story, his eyes would mist over with pride. But life changes. One moment Dad was winning every Jersey trophy available at the Provincial Cattle Club awards, and a few years later the farm was a thing of the past. Lost when a promise of quota to secure a loan to build a barn and increase a herd was broken. The early 80s was not as cordial a time between banks and farmers and milk boards, and our farm was not the only casualty. It was the push to move back to BC for my father, who had lived there in the 60s and started a family with his first wife, and the move back in the 80s would prove to be forever. We settled in Delta because Dad knew the farming families from show days as a young man, and he'd worked in the area in the 60s. He was a herdsman for the Savages and Hendricksons before taking some money earned in selling cattle into Mexico before leaving Manitoba and putting a down payment on a house in Ladner. To Mom and Dad, it was an incredibly expensive house. It had 2 floors, it had gold shag rug, and a fireplace. It cost $90,000 and had a mortgage rate of 13%. And the one thing both my parents knew was they were never going to be able to pay it off. The herdsman positions had not worked out, unfortunately. Dad needed work. And so he'd run a hay crew in Manitoba before he and Mom had bought the farm. He had a Class 1 license, so he headed on up near Langley and drove into Vanderveen hay sales with his bale hooks and asked for a job. He was about 47 years old. He asked one of the guys behind the desk in the office if they were hiring. The guy was younger than Dad. Everyone in the yard was younger than Dad. The guy looked at him and said, "You see any old guys around here?" Dad replied, "No, but I still need a job." John Vanderveen then offered Dad $5 an hour and said he could go out with Big Mike to unload 2 trailers of hay. John also said, "I'll have a check here ready for you at the end of the day, because I don't think you'll be coming back." Dad held his own through the first trailer, but it nearly killed him. Big Mike basically did both their jobs through the second one. Saved his ass. But Dad had a job now, and he went back the next day, and he went back the day after. Delivering hay got Dad all over BC, and onto so many farms. Of course, his favorite were the dairy farms. Things were changing. There were far more Holstein herds and less Jersey herds. Many people he'd seen as farmhands in the 50s now owned their own farms. He made friends with many farmers, and his favorite runs were often to Vancouver Island, and that's how we discovered Parksville. We'd go over for holidays on a weekend to deliver hay. We found a family who owned a campsite with cabins, and we could park the rig there. The family loved to salmon fish, and thus began the next passion of Dad's, going out fishing. Many a night of laughter and fun were had at the cabins in Parksville, including when Bill and Joe Miller came up from Duncan to share some drinks, a game of horseshoes, and laughter, while my sister, with a few too many drinks in her, regaled us with her version of "There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza." Best ending of a song ever. I'll let you ask her what it is. However, the call for cattle came back, and Dad again turned to working with the next generation at the Savage Farm in Ladner of Alamar Farms. He was a herdsman again for a number of years, and the focus on jerseys and show cattle and cattle sales and Jersey farm yogurt. It was a heady time, and Dad loved showing. He was competitive. He loved winning. He loved working to create strong lines and great udders and lots of milk. Jersey milk. But milking in a stanchion barn, that's one where you have to bend down beside that udder and clean it and milk her out and then get up and go around and do it again. Hard on the body. And the work in the fields got tough too. So, Johnny Vanderveen appeared again and took Dad to lunch and offered work without pitching bales. Just putting that Arthur charm to work for hay sales. And Dad accepted. He got his first phone in a bag that you carried to the truck and plugged it in. Technology got sweet, and then he got the brick phone after that one. Dad's relationship with his phone had begun. Dad and a good friend he'd made from Sunnyvale Farms on Vancouver Island, John Pullman, took the plunge together in the mid-90s and started Pacific Forage Bag. John was to sell ag bag machines and silage plastic on the island, and Dad was to cover the mainland. They went to work, got things promoted, started selling and moving, and John, who'd suffered from what appeared to be migraines, was unfortunately taken by a brain aneurysm. The day before he passed, Dad had gone to visit John, and things had improved. They visited, things had been great. When he got the call that he was gone, Dad couldn't believe it. He never got over that loss. John was one of 2 Vancouver Island farmers who were gone too soon and he had trouble letting go of. As Dave Robertson texted me a few days back about my dad and said, "I miss my friend." So too did Dad miss Dave Pendry and John Pullman, both gone too soon. But, oh my, if you knew either of those men, can you imagine what they're doing with Dad up in heaven right now? Dad and Mom carried on the business after John's death, and through the years, Dad and his buddy Garner Extrand sold baggers across the province until Dad eventually started the process of developing a new silage bagger, now called the Track Pack, that is manufactured right here in BC by JBS. A feat Dad lost a lot of sleep over at times, but it felt immensely proud about when they were finally produced. Also, Dad and his nephew Kim Warburton of Manitoba started a corn seed wholesale company to sell corn seed in BC and Manitoba. Kim is of Arthur descent, and yes, charming, great smile, can sell anything. Dad just loved him, period. Dad was the first to hold barbecues supporting corn trials, the only one to serve ribeye steak and kick-ass beans. He loved the events, just like he loved cattle shows and trade shows, opportunities to come together and bullshit with industry folks and friends. Fadden brothers, Kielstra family, Van Dongens, Porters, DeYoungs, Meedemas, Foxes, Wittas. Just a few of the relationships maintained and grown through seed, dirt, respect, great laughter, and good scotch. Or tea, as he sometimes called it. As my dad's health and mobility failed, his only long-standing passion that remained besides selling, or being on the phone, was gardening. His roses, veggies, tulips, daffs. You cannot see people here necessarily, but if anyone from Alberta to Ontario hears about the garden, right now they're rolling their eyes. Because it was a favorite pastime for Bryan to phone or text and say, well, my insert flower here, crocus, daffodil, tulip, is coming up. And what's your temperature at? -32. How much snow's on there? That's too bad. It never got old. My dad began traveling late in life with Mum and their great friend Rula. You could call them the Three Musketeers, but really they traveled as Bryan and his harem. It was Bryan and wife number 1 and wife number 2, or Bryan and his wife and his girlfriend. Rula actually got into the hospitals at times with those comments. I'm his other wife. They got to Greece, Italy, Ireland. Oh, so many stories. Rula loved the dance, the fun, the sun. Mum loved the dance, the fun, the galleries. Dad loved the history. He wanted to read every plaque. He wanted to feel what it was like to walk where Aristotle walked. He wanted to know what happened during the war, and he wanted to see the land. There's a lovely story of Dad and Rula swimming to an outcropping of rocks off her island of Zakynthos. And on that rocky outcropping in the Mediterranean, Dad found sea salt. A pool of ocean water had evaporated on the rock with the sun, and salt was left behind. Well, he wanted it. So Rula's sister provided a bag. They scooped it up. Dad put it on his chest, and he swam on his back to the boat, threw it into the boat, and he brought it back to Canada. My father also loved cooking and had taken French cuisine lessons, and that salt was a prized possession for years. I had the great gift of working with my dad for the last 17 years. It's a gift I never ever took for granted. I've been blessed in continuing to work based on the great foundation Dad laid down for our business. I know that work is supposed to be a great distraction from grief, but unfortunately some days, Dad was my work. He was my first text in the morning, and he was often my last text at night. He bookended my days. He was my best supporter, and he was my Google of ag info when required. Andy, as he said, wished we could have downloaded his knowledge onto a hard drive. But I'm not the only one who lost him in this industry. Back in that hospital room, Dad's health diminished quickly, and due to medication and trouble with the hearing aids, his ability to communicate was compromised. He began texting more, and then that got tougher to do too. And I was late in telling John Vanderveen what was happening. And so by the time they could have spoken, Dad was no longer able to speak. So John sent a lovely text to Dad from he and his wife Jackie, along with many other messages that people sent. And I made sure Dad could read John's message. And then Dad took his phone and he texted to John. Best job I ever had, for $5 an hour. And John immediately texted back, best employee I ever had, for $5 an hour. Dad was a great soul, and I will miss him. And I will ache to hear that laugh until my dying day. And then it will be my turn to see his smile and be where I need to be again. Thank you.
Just, Diane's going to come up and do a poem. Just before she does, I have one anecdote I have to add to your story because the can was starting to rattle. A story he has told to many different people and to me a few times. When I delivered those jerseys to your place that morning in Manitoba, we had a high-scoring cow on board that we were taking back to Rockella jerseys in Ontario. And Bryan has told many people many times, he said, for 3 hours that day, I had the 2 highest scoring jerseys in Canada on my farm in Edwin, Manitoba.
That's right.
So awesome.
There, it's quieted. Diane?
Yep.
Saving some of the best for last. You come up and after that we're going to have a toast.
It's cold in here, isn't it?
It is cool.
We're a little chilly.
I want to acknowledge, first of all, Brian's brother Wayne, his sister Helen, who are watching right now. And I want to tell our sister-in-law, Ann Arthur, that the snowdrops are blooming. I'm very happy today that the Get of Sire and the progeny of Dam are here. And I'd like to thank Lex, Allie, Ava, and Sadie for making this happen now. And I'm going to thank Will Ness again for our live streaming. Because, Will, I was so relieved when you didn't bring your drone and you brought your dad instead to help us. And you even brought some muffins from your mom, which I've hidden.
Oh.
And I want to thank our friend Rula Adamopoulos for the wonderful Greek baking that she's provided for us today. Brian's favorite, you know, baklava, kurabiya, tiropita, that sort of thing. I want to thank Vanderveen Hay Sales for letting us use their bales today. And Johnny, if you're watching, I want you to know that if all farmers that we wanted to have with us today could have been here, I would have auctioned them off. You know how long it was before we were able to see Bryan in the hospital. I want to thank Lex for realizing how to smuggle food to him and for figuring out how to bypass the rule about one person per day to see him, and for convincing the doctors to release him. I need to thank the Calgary boys for being here then and for making it physically possible for Bryan to come home and come upstairs. And I want to thank Pam for her gentle care and for making him smile. Bryan and I met as kids on the prairies in Manitoba. At one point we went to separate one-room schools, not very many miles apart. So the two schools would get together for Christmas concerts and sports events. And one of those events was dodgeball. Simple game. One team gathered around the outside of a big chalk circle, and the other team went inside and had the ball thrown at them until there was probably generally just one person left and one throw left to designate who was going to be the winner. I was in the middle, and Bryan was on the outside circle, and he asked for the ball. He threw it at my midriff so hard that he nearly knocked the wind out of me. And there's your sign. It wouldn't be the last time he took my breath away. He's been gone a year less 2 days. Sufficient time for me to gather my thoughts about that man. But unlike other widows, my guy hasn't improved in character since he's been gone. Because I can still remember most of his idiosyncrasies and foibles, and I'm not crazy about them yet. I don't miss some of them yet. For instance, that man could grow hair all over his body except his head, and he shed like a black lad. We can think about snoring, his comments about my icy feet in bed, complaints about my using his razor when I shave my legs, his complete inability to pick up one pair of socks, and his tiresome reminders that tomatoes don't belong in the refrigerator. His refusal to give up his bridge column in the newspaper, even though my crossword was on the same page. And his shouting at the television at poor Brad Gushu or somebody who missed an impossible shot. And what the hell was Jones thinking, making a call like that? And his refusal to sleep in just a little bit when there wasn't a Jersey cow in sight, and the 5:15 a.m. ferry had sailed. And his stubborn pig-headedness, demonstrated best by his refusal to take medication when he was in horrific pain. What I do miss about Bryan Alexander Arthur is so poignant and precious, I can't write it down. I can't say it out loud. I miss everything, every day. I miss all of it, all the time.
Thank you, Diane. Okay. Again, thank you to everybody that was able to come out and come to this, and thank you for arranging this. It's been wonderful, and thank you everybody that was able to tune in. I hope that far and wide you enjoyed this as much as we did right here, and again, we're sorry that it couldn't have been a larger thing. So I'm just going to read this little ditty, a toast to Bryan Arthur, and then a Scotsman born in Canada. He loved the Jersey breed. The hay hooks resting silently because there is no need. His curling broom sits relaxed. He has cast his final stone. Friends and family reminisce of Bryan on his throne. All will miss this gentle soul who made so many friends. We'll raise a glass and toast you, sir, until we meet again. Now please join me in raising your glass in a toast to a wonderful man, to Bryan Arthur.
Bryan Arthur.
Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountain, Shenandoah River. Life is old there, older than the trees, younger than the mountains, growing like a breeze. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads.
this time that I'm killing. I'm no longer one of those guys. As sure as I live, this love that I give is gonna be yours until the day that I die. Oh baby, I'm gonna love you forever, forever and ever, amen. As long as old men sit and talk about the weather, as long as old women sit and talk about old men. If you wonder how long I'll be faithful, I'll be happy to tell you again. I'm gonna love you forever and ever, forever and ever, amen. They say time takes its toll.
Why are there so many songs about rainbows? And what's on the other side? Rainbows are visions, but only illusions. And rainbows have nothing to hide. So we've been told, and some choose to believe it. I know they're wrong, wait and see. Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me. Who said that every wish would be heard and answered when wished on the morning star? Somebody thought of that, and someone believed it. Look what it's done so far. What's so amazing that keeps us stargazing? And what do we think we might see? Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me. All of us under its spell. We know that it's probably magic. Have you been half asleep? And have you heard voices? I've heard them calling my name. Is this the sweet sound that calls the young sailor? The voice might be one and the same. I've heard it too many times to ignore it. It's something that I'm supposed to be. Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me.
In twilight glow I see blue eyes crying in the rain. When we kissed goodbye and parted, I knew we'd never meet again. dying ember, and only memories remain. And through the ages I'll remember blue eyes crying in the rain. Someday when we meet up yonder, we'll stroll hand in hand again in a land that knows no parting. Blue eyes crying in the rain.
Gwyn mar o'r siw da heid yn ni, is hi da lugus dŵr yn bod. Hwgym yr linni y gynyon tro, beth bwych ar lom y bosh.
All the money that e'er I had, I spent it in good company, and all the harm I've ever done, alas, it was to none but me. And all I've done for want of wit, to memory now I can't recall. So fill to me the parting glass, good night and joy be to you all. That e'er I had, they're sorry for my going away, and all the sweethearts that e'er I had, they'd wish me one more day to stay. Since it fell into my lot that I should rise and you should not, I gently rise and softly call, good night and joy be to you all. But since it fell into my lot that I should rise and you should not, I gently rise and softly call, good night and joy be to you all. So fill to me the parting glass and drink a health whatever befalls, then